Have you ever felt invisible in your own, invisible to the man I married, and trapped under the silent manipulation of the woman who was supposed to love me most? The day my husband slid divorce papers across the kitchen table is a day I will never forget. He didn't look angry, he didn't look frustrated, he looked exhausted. As if he had already said goodbye in his head 100 times before uttering the words aloud. Sitting just 3 feet away was his mother, calm, poised, her face holding the patient stillness of someone who had already won a game that had been going on for years, a game she had built quietly and meticulously while I had been unaware. That afternoon didn't come out of nowhere, it was the result of 2 years of subtle, deliberate manipulation, and to understand how I survived, you need to understand every small detail, every quiet betrayal, every calculated move she made to break me down without my noticing. I was 41, a wife, a homemaker, a partner, a peacekeeper, and for the last 2 years, a prisoner in a house that no longer recognized me. My husband and I had met when we were both 27, and I had been drawn to him because of his steady, grounded nature. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but he was reliable, consistent, someone who made decisions slowly and kept them. I thought I had found stability, a safe harbor in a chaotic world. We married 2 years later and built a life that seemed normal, good, ordinary, and yet even in those first years, cracks existed that I could not see because I trusted the man I loved and underestimated the woman who would become my adversary. His mother, who had never fully accepted me, watched my every move with the subtlety of someone plotting decades in advance. At holidays, she asked about my health in the tone of someone completing a checklist, polite but hollow, never overtly cruel but always calculating. I didn't know then that the real weapon she had in her hands was time. She had waited patiently for an opportunity, and when the property clause in our marital agreement, the land that would transfer to me if my husband initiated divorce, became valuable, her plan sprang into motion. It started small, almost imperceptible, subtle things that seemed insignificant at first. He stopped holding my hand in the car. Not dramatically, just stopped. He asked questions that seemed casual, then more pointed, questions about weekends I spent with friends, small purchases on our shared card, interactions with coworkers. Each time I answered calmly, he didn't look reassured. He looked as if he was filing away evidence somewhere dark, storing each answer in a mental ledger designed to prove my guilt. I suggested counseling. He refused. I tried harder. He retreated further. And I felt the slow, creeping isolation of living with someone who no longer saw me, who no longer recognized the woman he married. Month after month, the distance grew. Then, the night everything cracked open arrived. He accused me of infidelity, of hiding money, of betrayal I had never committed. The words were precise, rehearsed, but the accusations were false. I had done nothing, yet I was standing in a storm I hadn't even seen brewing. I didn't panic, I didn't cry. I was calm, but inside, something shifted. I realized that emotion without information is suffering, and I needed information. The next morning, I made 2 calls, a private investigator and a forensic accountant. I needed facts, proof, a way to understand what had been done to me and how. Over 6 months, I uncovered every manipulation, every fabricated message, every altered document, every subtle lie crafted to convince my husband of my guilt. The investigator traced metadata on screenshots. The accountant traced financial documents. And slowly, meticulously, the truth revealed itself. The mastermind behind 2 years of psychological warfare was none other than my mother-in-law. She had spent years constructing a parallel reality, fabricating evidence, feeding it piece by piece to my husband so that he believed he had no choice but to end our marriage. I was stunned, but I was not broken. The calm that had settled over me when the divorce papers first slid across the table became a sharpened focus. I began to plan, not in anger, not in panic, but in clarity. I would expose the lies, I would reclaim my dignity, and I would ensure that the one who thought she had won would realize she had failed completely. That afternoon, I took control. Didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I let the binder I had prepared, filled with forensic analysis, investigative reports, and evidence of her deception, speak for me. Minute by minute, page by page, the architecture of her plan crumbled before our eyes. My husband, who had believed every lie, was left in shock. His mother, the orchestrator, sat frozen, silent, as her years of manipulation were revealed in undeniable evidence. And in that quiet, powerful moment, I understood something crucial. Revenge does not require rage. Revenge requires patience, intelligence, and precision. It requires seeing the whole board, understanding every piece, and making the decisive move that leaves no room for escape. I chose the move that would preserve my integrity and reveal the truth. I did not need to take property, I did not need to punish. I needed only to expose, to demonstrate that deception, no matter how carefully constructed, cannot withstand a determined, intelligent, and calm mind. That was the first step in reclaiming my life, my dignity, and the narrative that had been stolen from me. Over the next days, weeks, and months, I continued to collect, uncover, and reveal the web of lies that had held me captive emotionally. And every revelation, every piece of undeniable evidence, only strengthened my resolve. The story of betrayal, of deceit, of manipulation, had been written against me, but I became the author of its conclusion. The moment I realized my husband's accusations were false, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I understood that to survive, I needed to stop trying to explain myself emotionally and start understanding logically. My grief and confusion were heavy, but they could no longer blind me. I began to retrace the steps of the last 2 years, paying attention to details I had previously ignored. Every question my husband asked, every look he gave, every hesitation he displayed suddenly had meaning. I created timelines, documented conversations, and remembered every tiny anomaly that now appeared as a calculated move rather than coincidence. The first call to the private investigator set everything in motion. He listened carefully as I detailed the months of subtle estrangement, the questions that had slowly escalated, the strange insistence on fabricated evidence. I gave him access to my phone, my messages, our shared accounts, everything. He promised to trace everything back to its origin. At the same time, the forensic accountant began combing through our financial history. Her eyes were sharp, her methods meticulous. She explained that any anomaly in records, even a single altered figure, could be traced if examined properly. Slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to emerge. A single bank document, altered to suggest I had moved money secretly, was the first clue. The numbers didn't match the account history. Metadata, timestamps, even the format of the document revealed subtle tampering. Then came the screenshots my husband had claimed to have received. Metadata from those files revealed they were not generated from my device, or any device connected to me. The private investigator traced the device to a location in my husband's family home. The conclusion was inescapable. Someone had spent years fabricating evidence. Someone had carefully planted lies, feeding them to him incrementally, with perfect timing, ensuring that he would see a pattern that didn't exist. Every detail of the past 2 years, the subtle coldness, the questions, the accusations, the emotional withdrawal, was a piece of the plan. And the mastermind? His mother. She had the patience of a predator and the knowledge of a lifetime's influence over her son. The more I uncovered, the more precise and meticulous her deception appeared. She had created an entire alternate reality, a web of evidence designed to convince my husband that I had betrayed him. Messages that never existed, financial transactions that never occurred, and a narrative carefully orchestrated over 2 years. And yet, even as I uncovered this, I remained calm. Each new revelation was a confirmation of what I already suspected, and it strengthened my resolve. I spent hours analyzing patterns, reconstructing conversations, comparing timelines, noting inconsistencies she had overlooked. There was a certain poetry to her carelessness. In her attempt to be perfect, she had left evidence, breadcrumbs that only someone paying close attention could follow. That someone was me. I documented everything, organizing it meticulously into binders, with folders for financial evidence, screenshots, metadata, and investigative reports. Every page, every note, every timestamp told the story of her deception. And as I compiled the evidence, I reflected on how much I had learned about my own resilience. How much strength it took to endure 2 years of subtle emotional abuse and manipulation, to maintain composure while being accused falsely, to continue living while a carefully constructed lie dictated the perceptions of those around me. Every day had been a test, and now, with evidence in hand, I was ready to tip the balance. I understood fully the psychological dynamics she had exploited, the way she knew her son's mind, the way he would interpret incremental proof without questioning it, the way manipulation becomes almost invisible when administered slowly and deliberately. I rehearsed what would happen when I presented the evidence, imagining the expressions on their faces, the realization that they had misjudged me, and the shock of truth descending like a tide they could not resist. This was not just revenge, it was revelation. It was justice served with precision, intelligence, and composure. I knew exactly how to proceed. On the morning when the divorce papers were to be finalized, I brought the binder with me. I didn't announce it, I didn't threaten, I simply placed it on the table. The silence in the room was palpable. My husband looked at the papers, then at me, then at his mother. I didn't speak immediately. I let him begin to read. Minute after minute, he turned pages, his expression shifting from disbelief to shock. The false messages, the altered documents, the metadata evidence, every single piece laid out clearly, indisputably. His mother tried to interject, but he stopped her with a hand. He did not speak, he did not argue, he simply read. And as he read, the full weight of the truth hit him. For 2 years, he had grieved a betrayal that never happened. For 2 years, he had doubted the woman he married. For 2 years, he had been manipulated by the person he trusted the most outside of me. And now, the deception was exposed, page by page, fact by fact. It was overwhelming, undeniable. His mother, who had orchestrated everything, realized at last that her plan had failed completely. Every subtle manipulation she had executed had been undone by the very evidence she had left behind. In that moment, I felt the steady, quiet satisfaction of someone who had endured, who had prepared, who had waited, and who had executed flawlessly. I did not feel triumph over her, I did not revel in anger. I felt clarity, control, justice. And in that clarity, I realized the greatest revenge is not anger, but the unshakable truth revealed in such a way that those who plotted cannot ignore it, cannot manipulate it, cannot deny it. Over the next weeks, as we navigated the fallout, I maintained composure, carefully guiding interactions, ensuring that the narrative could not be twisted again. My husband, now confronted with the evidence of his mother's manipulation, was left to grapple with the realization that 2 years of doubt, grief, and false accusations were not mine to bear. I had preserved my dignity. I had exposed the truth. And the woman who thought she had orchestrated victory had learned that meticulous deception can be undone by patience, intelligence, and determination. The story continued, as I reflected on how deeply this experience had changed me. I had endured psychological warfare, subtle emotional abuse, false accusations, and manipulation. Yet I emerged stronger, sharper, more aware of the dynamics of power, deception, and influence. And I knew that the lesson I had learned, the lesson of resilience, investigation, and the patient application of truth, would stay with me forever. The binders, the reports, the evidence, every detail of her plan laid bare, became a testament to my endurance and strategic thinking. And in the quiet moments after the confrontation, I allowed myself to feel a deep, measured satisfaction. Knowing that the truth had prevailed. 2 years of being accused, manipulated, doubted, and questioned came to an end not with anger, not with vengeance, but with undeniable, irrefutable truth. And in that truth, I reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my narrative. The morning after I placed the binder on the table, the house felt different. The air was heavy with anticipation, tension, and disbelief. My husband sat there, flipping through pages, each one revealing a fragment of the reality he had been blind to for 2 long years. His mother watched, rigid and controlled, yet a flicker of panic crossed her face as the undeniable truth became clear. I did not speak immediately. I did not add commentary. I allowed the facts to speak for themselves, for they carried a weight no denial could overcome. Each screenshot, each financial document, each metadata analysis revealed the careful orchestration of lies, the invisible threads she had pulled to manipulate not only me, but him. Minute by minute, she watched the structure she had built crumble. Her years of patience, calculated strategy, and subtle manipulation evaporated under the bright, uncompromising light of truth. And my husband, the man who had loved and trusted me, who had spent 2 years believing in a betrayal that never existed, finally looked up from the binder. The shock in his eyes was profound, not anger, not betrayal, but the realization of how deeply he had been deceived. He looked at his mother and asked, in a voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief, "Is this true?" She did not answer. Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. And in that silence, her plan failed. My husband understood, without a word from me, the depth of her manipulation. I had not raised my voice, I had not cried, I had not pleaded. I had merely presented the facts. The ultimate revenge does not require shouting or fury. The ultimate revenge requires patience, meticulous planning, intelligence, and composure. It requires turning the very weapons of your enemy against them, exposing every lie and manipulation so that they crumble under the weight of truth. Over the next few hours, as we processed the revelation, I ensured that no further manipulation could take place. I maintained calm, clarity, and precision, controlling every interaction to protect the integrity of the evidence and the narrative. Each time my husband attempted to speak to his mother, I ensured he understood what had occurred and what the evidence proved. And as the day unfolded, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. 2 years of being accused, doubted, and manipulated had been excruciating, but they had revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. I had endured psychological warfare, carefully calculated deceit, and emotional isolation. And yet, I emerged unbroken. The property clause, the supposed leverage my mother-in-law thought she had over me, had been irrelevant in the face of the truth. I did not seek revenge for material gain. I did not desire property, wealth, or even vindication in the traditional sense. My revenge was the restoration of truth, the exposure of manipulation, and the reclamation of my life and dignity. In the days that followed, legal actions were initiated. His mother faced civil proceedings for tortious interference, her schemes documented and undeniable. Every attempt she made to twist the narrative failed. My husband and I, although not reconciled fully, began to navigate a new form of relationship, one tempered by honesty, reflection, and mutual understanding. He carried guilt for 2 years of misplaced doubt, and I made conscious choices about how much of that guilt to absorb, how much to confront, and how much to allow to fade naturally. I maintained calm, clarity, and precision, controlling every interaction to protect the integrity of the evidence and the narrative. Each time my husband attempted to speak to his mother, I ensured he understood what had occurred and what the evidence proved. And as the day unfolded, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. 2 years of being accused, doubted, and manipulated had been excruciating, but they had revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. I had endured psychological warfare, carefully calculated deceit, and emotional isolation. And yet, I emerged unbroken. The property clause, the supposed leverage my mother-in-law thought she had over me, had been irrelevant in the face of the truth. I did not seek revenge for material gain. I did not desire property, wealth, or even vindication in the traditional sense. My revenge was the restoration of truth, the exposure of manipulation, and the reclamation of my life and dignity. In the days that followed, legal actions were initiated. His mother faced civil proceedings for tortious interference, her schemes documented and undeniable. Every attempt she made to twist the narrative failed. My husband and I, although not reconciled fully, began to navigate a new form of relationship, one tempered by honesty, reflection, and mutual understanding. He carried guilt for 2 years of misplaced doubt, and I made conscious choices about how much of that guilt to absorb, how much to confront, and how much to allow to fade naturally. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the psychological warfare she had waged. The precision, patience, and cunning were remarkable, yet ultimately flawed. For in her attempt to control every variable, she left traces, breadcrumbs that only a determined mind could follow. And I followed them. The 2 years of manipulation, the months of investigation, the meticulous documentation, every step was part of a strategy to reclaim not just my rights, but my sense of self. I discovered a truth about human strength. Resilience is born not just from endurance, but from intelligence, strategic thinking, and emotional control. My revenge was not born of rage, it was born of clarity and resolve. And it was perfect in its execution. The psychological weight of 2 years of false accusations, doubt, and manipulation was immense, yet I had transformed that weight into action, planning, and precision. I had turned the instruments of deceit against the deceiver, and in doing so, reclaimed control. By the end of the confrontation, my husband understood fully the extent of his mother's actions. He faced the truth with shock, remorse, and a deep recognition of the years of grief he had carried unnecessarily. And his mother, who had believed she would emerge victorious, had nothing left but silence and the undeniable reality of her failure. My reflection on the entire ordeal was simple yet profound. The most satisfying revenge is not cruelty, not destruction, but the revelation of truth, executed with intelligence, patience, and composure. It requires planning, endurance, and understanding of human nature. 2 years of manipulation were undone in a few hours, not by anger, not by confrontation, but by evidence, logic, and meticulous preparation. And as I sit back and reflect, I realize that the lessons extend far beyond this personal experience. Life will present betrayal, deceit, and calculated manipulation. But truth, patience, intelligence, and determination will always have the final say. My journey from a ghost in my own home to a woman who reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her narrative is a testament to the power of meticulous planning, clear thinking, and calm resilience. The story does not end with revenge, it ends with reflection, understanding, and a new beginning. I survived 2 years of silent emotional warfare, 2 years of accusations, and 2 years of subtle deception. And I emerged not broken, not bitter, but stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own power. My husband and I continue to navigate our lives carefully, with honesty and understanding, but the memory of those 2 years remains as a reminder of what is possible when deception is confronted with truth, patience, and strategic action. And in the end, the ultimate revenge is not in taking from others, but in reclaiming what is yours, in truth, dignity, and the unshakable knowledge that no calculated manipulation can withstand clarity, preparation, and the patient, deliberate application of intelligence. I found the truth, exposed the lies, reclaimed my life, and demonstrated that even the most careful schemes can be dismantled when patience, intelligence, and precision are applied. This story is not just about revenge, it is about resilience, clarity, and the triumph of truth over manipulation. And that triumph, quiet yet absolute, is the most satisfying victory of all.